Hey everybody, hope this finds you doing well. This is Networkchain. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. There definitely were a few really big news stories over the past week. We can see Bitcoin is currently trading at around $64,000. Not much has changed over the past week. Ethereum at 1,700. BNB at $590, down a little under 3%. Solana up about 10% over the past 7 days. It's currently trading nearing $75. We have Hyperliquid, which is still all of the hype, and it is currently trading at 12.68% higher than it was a week ago. Then we have Dogecoin still clinging on in the top 10, currently trading at around 8 cents. So one of the larger news stories over the past week, particularly when it came to the equities market, is the resilience and rise of SpaceX. First, it was the largest IPO in history, raising over $75 billion, and it has actually gotten into the top 10 of companies by market cap. It's currently, in terms of assets by market cap, is currently ranked at number 8. At one point, it actually rose above Microsoft. Now, we have to remember, a lot of people are excited about getting into SpaceX. It's still considered highly valued when you consider how much they bring in revenue. Now, there are projections that at some point they will continue to bring in more revenue year over year. But as of right now, they brought in around $19 billion over the past trailing 12 months. And you compare that to Microsoft, which brought in over $280 billion over the past 12 months. And they were at one point in time trading above Microsoft. So we can, try to take what we will with that information. But those who are very, excited about this stock, just be very considerate of the fundamentals and the technicals as well. It's still very early on. And also remember that there's only 4% of the entire float, which means basically a small percentage of the actual shares that are a part of this company. Only 4% are actually on the open market. So of course there's a lot of demand, a lot of excitement behind this stock. And so because there's only a small percentage of shares that are actually on the open market right now, that of course is going to cause the price to go up. Now, as more shares come into the market, when we have these unlocks, and there's a scheduled unlock that happens every month or so, and it's going to go all the way up until, I believe, the next 6 months, when you have a lot more of the institutional investors and seed investors and early investors that were able to get into SpaceX in the private rounds. All of their shares will be unlocked in the next 6 months, and then the founder's shares, I believe all of his shares can be unlocked in the next year. So there's still a lot of shares that could potentially come into the market. That's dilution, just as we've talked about when it comes to the US dollar. The more dollars that come into the market, it's going to inflate the price of goods and services, and therefore it actually diminishes the value of that $1. And so that could potentially happen with SpaceX shares. So we're, at least for us, are going to stay on the sidelines for now. We do recognize that there's a possibility that this could one day maybe be the largest company in the world. They have a lot of big ambitions, but there's still a lot of time, and they're just now on the market. So we're going to kind of let it settle, because generally speaking, IPOs, because of the unlocks that we talked about, happens over a period of time. Generally, IPOs tend to go down in value throughout that first 6 months to a year. So we're just going to kind of wait and see. But it is exciting to see that a lot of people are excited about space and beyond. So that's just a general observation on what's happening from the AI and equities front. And when we look at Bitcoin, it is now down to number 15. At one point, it actually was ahead of silver during the bull run in 2025. And now you see Bitcoin is currently trading just under 1.3 trillion market cap, right behind Meta platform. So we'll continue to keep you posted on how Bitcoin is doing. And you can see these memory stocks are making a big leap. They are in the top 20 now. with SK Hynix and Micron have been on a tremendous run over the past couple of months. So we're definitely seeing what's happening with the AI space, and most of the companies in the top 10 are related to artificial intelligence. Of course, Nvidia being the largest of them all, and it is currently the largest company behind gold as an asset, which is 29 trillion. So if Bitcoin were to ever reach the value of gold being digital gold, it still has an over 20x that it could potentially do from here if it were to reach the market cap of gold right now. Obviously, those are lofty aspirations, but it's still a possibility as we look at Bitcoin being a better form of gold. The next big news story over the past week was the meeting of the Federal Reserve, and the new chairman, Kevin Warsh, had his first press conference. The Federal Reserve did decide to keep the federal funds rate at 3.5 to 3.7%, so there's been no change there. And we also had a little bit more information in terms of the goals of the Federal Reserve and what they're planning on doing with regards to some new task force that they are assigning to help with getting information, compiling information as they continue to come up with a monetary policy. And as we know, it's very important to keep up with the macroeconomic landscape and the Federal Reserve because of the fact that they play such a large role in how money moves, particularly when it comes to those federal funds rate. It really can make a difference with regards to the shrinking or the enlargement of the US dollar and how the demand comes into the US dollar, particularly when it comes to other countries that and other institutions that use the US dollar for certain interest as well as for borrowing for major companies. So there's a lot that comes into play and has ramifications when it comes to equities, even commodities like Bitcoin, silver, gold as well. So we are definitely going to continue to stay posted with what's happening with the Federal Reserve's decision-making process. And we can see here that Kevin Warsh also reiterated the 2% inflation target of the Federal Reserve. It's been a long-standing target, and he says here that the Federal Reserve long objective is still being held at 2%. The 2 is the left of the decimal point, and for now 0 is to the right. So they're still looking at 2.0% as their goal. But as we know, the recent inflation numbers came in very hot. We see that the inflation grew to 4.2% year over year. And if we take a look at the past numbers of inflation, we can see that over the past year, this is the highest that it's been thus far. A lot of it has to do with the oil prices that have spiked up because of the conflict overseas. And so we have seen the effect of that in the current inflation rate. And so we're going to see, likely, if there is an actual resolution. We still don't know yet because it continues to seem to go back and forth with regards whether or not we're going to have an actual resolution or not. But if oil prices does start to come down, then we could potentially see this inflation number come down a little bit as well. And I think that's part of the reason why the Federal Reserve has decided to stay steady with the federal funds rate currently. Now, if we look over the past 5 years, when the Federal Reserve had to begin hiking rates, and it had the fastest hiking rate schedule ever, when we saw inflation get as high as 9.1% in 2022. And as many of us know who invested in equities, even with Bitcoin and other commodities, a lot of those took a major dive in 2022 when the federal funds rate went down, or I should say when the federal funds rate was hiked, And so that caused a lot of nervousness that takes away from the growth trajectory of a lot of companies. And so we saw that we were in a bear market in 2022. And now we see that we have been in a bull market over the past couple of years. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the federal funds rate was cut over time. So now we're seeing that inflation is starting to tweak back up. But if we can get it back down, then we could potentially still see equities doing well, and maybe over time we can see Bitcoin begin to make its trajectory change towards a bullish market potentially in the next year or two. Obviously time will tell, but we'll continue to keep you posted. But as we mentioned in our Instagram as well as X posts, that it's very important that we make sure that we take a look at the macro as well, because it definitely affects what happens with equities as well as Bitcoin. So if we take a look at what's happening with Bitcoin, at the end of the day, as we say, Bitcoin for a rainy day, this is the time when you want to be accumulating, when you want to buy. If you're looking at the old adage of buying low and selling high, at any point in time in Bitcoin's history, if you bought when Bitcoin took a major dip, you see that it continued to run up after years afterwards. If you were able to get in during the major dip, it continued to run up years afterwards. So we're still waiting to see whether or not we're going to bottom anytime soon. It's still in play that we have a little bit more to go. Could potentially get back to 50,000, maybe even a little bit below, and maybe, or just kind of stay in this range for the next several months, maybe even towards the end of this year, and then start to creep back up. Obviously time will tell, but at the end of the day, when you look at the overall trajectory of what's happening here with Bitcoin, over time it continues to go up and to the right. So when you look at it from a bird's eye view, it actually is a pretty good looking chart in terms of the way that it's going up over time, and that it's not just a straight arrow up, because that's when it's more dangerous, that it can be a elevator crash down. So we're seeing that over its time here in existence, that the chart is looking quite nicely in terms of its trajectory. So of course we appreciate you checking us out here on YouTube. We bring you a video every week. We really appreciate you watching. Of course, check us out on X as well as IG, and we look forward to linking up with you soon on the network chain. In the meantime, take care. Bye-bye.